Hello everyone. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment saying where you're from and when you watched. That way, YouTube will continue to show you stories like this. Now, let's get started. Jack sat in the dark room, the yellow light flickering on his tense face. He had not been able to sleep well in the past few days. Every night, whispers echoed in the small house, as if someone was waiting outside the door. The windows occasionally shook from the strange wind, but Jack knew clearly that it was not just the wind. The haunted stories that the villagers told him had become reality, surrounding him every minute and every hour. Unable to bear the haunting, Jack decided to seek out another person in the village. People said there was an old woman named Margaret, who was a descendant of the person who used to manage St. Mary's Church before it was abandoned. She lived isolated at the end of the village, in an old wooden house covered with green moss. The villagers rarely dared to approach her because they thought she knew many strange things, but Jack believed that only she could give him answers. When Jack knocked on the door, Margaret appeared, a thin figure. Her eyes were cloudy but still, shining with a terrifying alertness. As soon as she saw Jack, she frowned, as if she had known something. Before Jack could say anything, she whispered that he had touched where he shouldn't, and now the darkness would never let him go. Jack sat down by the old fireplace and recounted his experiences. When he heard the details of the basement room, Margaret's eyes flashed with fear. She confirmed that it was where the old church's pastor had performed forbidden rituals. She said that the symbols on the wall were part of a seance, but it was never completed. The pastor's spirit was trapped, transformed into a half-human, half-demon entity, forever imprisoned in the darkness of St. Mary's. Jack shivered. He asked if there was any way to escape, but Margaret just shook her head. She said that once he saw it, he was marked. It would follow him until he turned around to face it directly, and only then would he have a chance to find a way out. But facing it did not mean survival. Many before Jack had tried, and all had disappeared. Jack left in a heavy mood. The road back home was shrouded in mist, the pale moonlight casting his shadow on the ground. He clearly felt something following him, though when he turned around he saw only emptiness. His mind began to fall into chaos between the boundary of reality and illusion. That night, Jack dreamed of the church again. This time, he saw himself standing before the broken altar, surrounded by distorted hymns. The singing sounded like hundreds of souls crying. Then from the darkness, a figure with glowing eyes appeared again. It approached each step heavy, its cold breath covering everything. Jack tried to retreat, but his feet seemed to be nailed to the tiled floor. The figure reached out, and Jack woke up in a panic. What was even more horrifying was that when Jack turned on the light, he saw a muddy stain on his bedroom floor, with wet shoe prints running from the window to the bed. A chill ran down Jack's spine, and he knew that this thing had crossed from his dream into reality. The next day, Jack returned to find Margaret again, hoping for more clues. But the cabin was empty. The door was open, and inside was only the cold ashes of the fireplace, as if she had never existed. Jack stood there for hours, fear and despair rising in his heart. He returned to the village, but the villagers seemed to avoid him. They whispered that Jack had been cursed by the church. Children ran away when they saw him, and adults closed their doors. The whole village seemed to be trying to cut off all contact with him, because they feared that the darkness would spread to them. Jack had no choice. He knew he had to return to St. Mary, this time not out of curiosity, but for his own life. He prepared a new flashlight, brought a small knife and a notebook to take notes. He wanted to find the truth, or at least leave a trace if he did not. Return when night fell. Jack stood in front of the church gate. This time, there was no longer the arrogance of the first time. His eyes were full of anxiety but determination. The old wooden door seemed to be waiting, creaking open in the howling wind. Once again, a cold air rushed out, wrapping around his body. Jack stepped in, the flashlight beam sweeping across the rotten rows of pews. Everything was the same as before, but something was different. He clearly felt the footsteps echoing with the beat of his heart as he walked towards the corridor leading to the basement. Jack heard a soft singing, like a choir from deep below. His heart tightened. With each step down the stairs, the singing became clearer, blending with the cold whispers. And when the flashlight beam reached the basement wall, Jack froze. The ancient symbols glowed like red burn marks, giving off an eerie glow. The room where the stone table sat in the center was no longer silent. The air was thick with the smell of incense and blood, making him choke. Jack trembled as he approached, the notebook in his hand shaking with each heartbeat. He tried to write down what he saw, but the pen was shaking too much to form words. Suddenly, from the stone table, a sound rang out like a groan from the ground. The black cloth moved again, even though there was no wind. Jack stood rooted to the spot, muttering a prayer. A white hand suddenly reached out from under the cloth, tapping lightly on the table like the rhythm of a mournful song. Jack screamed, rushing toward the stairs, but the footsteps followed closely behind, getting closer and closer. When he was near the top of the stairs, the door suddenly slammed shut, locking. He turned around, the flashlight shining directly on the figure. The bright eyes looked straight at him, not far away this time. The voice rang out deep, as if echoing from centuries. "You have returned, and you will never leave." Jack froze, his whole body paralyzed with fear. And that was the terrifying moment that marked the turning point. What awaited him in the darkness next was more terrifying than all the creepy nightmares he had ever known. In the next episode, Jack will have to face the priest's spirit directly in the dark basement, where the biggest secret of St. Mary's Church gradually revealed.